Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. Glad to be back with you for another day in the life of podcasting. Appreciate all of you who are tuning in for doing so. I have a lot to talk about today. We've obviously got a full slate. We've got some basketball news for the Mississippi State side of things. Mississippi State had a pretty good weekend for once this year on the basketball court. We'll talk about what they did well this weekend, and we'll get into that just a little bit later on. We had a legend in the filmmaking business pass away this weekend as well, so I want to discuss that. Actually, less than 24 hours ago is when he ended up passing away. So we'll talk about Rob Reiner's apparent murder by somebody who broke into his home. We'll talk about who that might have been and all that type of stuff later on. Also, excuse me, I did watch the new Knives Out film, Wake Up Dead Man. I'll give you my thoughts on it. And last but not least, if I have time, I'll get into a review of the new Metroid game, Metroid Prime 4. Give you my thoughts on it if we have time for it as we get to the end of the show. So, real quick, before we get into the actual show, I want to remind everyone, if you can, please follow me on all the podcasts, whatever podcasting app you use. If you could follow me on it and if you have a rating system on it, if you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, if you have some type of rating system on it, it would do me a huge favor if you could just hit the 5-star button. If you're on Apple, if you could write a very quick little review. Like I said, it doesn't have to be long. Just one little quick sentence is perfectly fine. Those things do help a lot in terms of getting the show out to other people. If you're on all the social media stuff, if you're watching this on YouTube, which I know a lot of people do, if you could also hit that little follow button as well, or that subscribe button, that helps me as well, because that seems to be where I'm getting most of the people who are listening / watching the podcast. So like I said, if you would go ahead and hit that subscribe button, it would help me out a lot. I'm also on TikTok. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those places. Like I said, I would really appreciate it. Back on Blue Sky. Blue Sky is back in Mississippi. They've made it where you can actually get on Blue Sky, Mississippi now, and I'm back there as well. So, like I said, if you could help me out by following me on all those places, I would really, really appreciate it. So, all right, let's get into the heart of the show. Mississippi State, we'll start with them, the basketball team, the men's basketball team, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the women's today. The men's basketball team gets a good win this weekend against the Utah Utes. They were on the road. Technically, it was a neutral site game because a lot of teams do this. Mississippi State did it last weekend when they played San Francisco in Tupelo. They played a game a game that would normally be considered a home game. You just move it a little bit further away in your state, and you get a bump in the net rankings because you played it technically on a neutral site floor. But it was in the state of Utah, so like I said, it was still very much a road win, even though they won't count that way in the net rankings. But Mississippi State moves to 5-5 on the year, and there's a few things that were very encouraging about this win. First and foremost, Josh Hubbard was on the court. That is the most encouraging thing, probably, is the fact that he was on the court. He doesn't look like he's going to miss any time from the injury that he suffered last weekend against the San Francisco Dons. So, like I said, he's back. He was back on the court. He's there, which is good to see. The other thing, a couple other things that are encouraging. One, even though Josh Hubbard was back, he didn't play well. This was one of his worst games as a Mississippi State Bulldog. He only goes 6 of 18 from the field, 1 of 6 from three-point range, and scores 13 points. So it's very possible that injury is still kind of hampering him a little bit. I don't know if he said anything about if that was bothering him, and that might have been a reason why he didn't shoot the ball as well as he normally does. Look, a big part of what his game is the jump shot. And if you have a bad ankle, it's going to be kind of hard to really get a confident jump when you're doing that jump shot, because that's one of the things that makes him so good is he's, 5'11", but the way he elevates when he takes his jump shot, it makes him about 6 inches taller. So he relies on that significantly. And Like I said, I don't know that was bothering him. That's one of the reasons why he did not play as well as he normally does. But he didn't play that well. But they still won, and that's the thing. They still won the game, despite the fact that Josh Hubbard was not at his best. So if you can continue to win when he's not at his best, that's an encouraging sign going forward. Because up until this point, if Josh Hubbard wasn't leading the team and if he wasn't just absolutely having one of his best games, Mississippi State wasn't winning, though, because that's been the way it has been through these first 10 games for the Bulldogs. So like I said, that's encouraging as well. Another thing that's encouraging, you get some really good bench play from Jabari McGee. McGee comes off the bench, ends up scoring 24 points, has a career high, shoots 5 of 7 from 3-point range. I think he was 8 of 13 overall, and just kind of comes out of nowhere. Look, he's actually had a couple of good games so far, but this was by far his best. He, like I said, comes off the bench and just absolutely has a monster game. I do tend to wonder if Mississippi State is going to consider moving him into the starting lineup, because he's played better this year than Sean Jones has played. I know Sean Jones has been with the team. He's a senior, and Chris Jans might be thinking that, he's kind of put his time in and he's kind of earned the right to start, but he's just not playing that well. I mean, this is another just kind of game where he's not really making any impact whatsoever. He was 1 of 3 from the field, had 2 points. He had a few rebounds, a couple assists, but he doesn't make that much of an impact on the team. He's only had one game where he just really stepped up and had a huge impact. Every other game, he's really struggled to make his presence known on the basketball court. And you have to wonder if he needs a reduced role, because where he has always thrived is coming in and providing a spark off the bench. And now that he seems to be, they're asking more of him this year, I do wonder if the pressure to do that is kind of weighing on him, and it's making him press a little bit, because like I said, I've always really enjoyed watching Sean Jones play when he's been in a more limited role these past few years. But this year, he just has not been able to contribute at the rate that he needs to be able to, at the level that he needs to be able to as a starter. Because if you're going to be a starter and playing starter minutes, you've got to give more than what Sean Jones is giving them. And Jabari McGee has shown the ability to do a little bit more. He's averaging 11 points, a few rebounds, a few assists, typical guard play. So you just kind of wonder if that's a possibility, because if you can get, I don't expect Jabari McGee to put up 24 points every single time that he goes out there, but if you're giving him starter minutes and you put him in there and he could get, if he's getting his average of 11 every single time, or getting, 12 or 13 to go along with Jaden Epps, who's getting, I'm not sure how many points Jaden Epps is averaging every game right now, but it's probably around 15 or 16 if I had to guess. Let me see if I can find it real quick. But give him that, to put him and Jaden Epps alongside Josh Hubbard, I think would put the Bulldogs in a much better position to win games. Yeah, I was pretty close. Jaden Epps is averaging 16 points per game. So like I said, you get Jaden Epps averaging 16, you get Jabari McGee, who's averaging 11, and who is shooting the ball pretty well. I mean, this year he is shooting almost 50% from 3-point range. So you've got some opportunities there, and I just do wonder if you can't keep him out of the starting lineup that much longer, because this is one of the things that is still Chris Jans is still struggling with. He can't find a rotation right now. He's still searching for that. He's still trying to figure it out. He had played Brandon Walker in the starting lineup for a few games. He went back to the bench this time. Didn't play that much. Only played like 5 or 6 minutes. Got 3 points in the process. Like I said, he's struggling to figure out his rotation, and the only 3 constants have been Jaden Epps, Sean Jones, and Josh Hubbard. And that makes me like I said, it makes me wonder if Sean Jones does need to start coming back off of the bench. Look, that's what I would do. I'm not the coach, but I think it's something that Chris Jans needs to consider is, possibly putting Jabari McGee on the starting rotation and moving Sean Jones back into a bench role. Look, he can still be a contributor. He can still play a good bit. It's just, I don't know that he can contribute to the level that he needs to as a starter. The last thing that's most encouraging about this is Mississippi State has a massive comeback. They were down by 17 points, probably about midway through the second half. And Mississippi State goes on a 20-2 run to take the lead, take a 1-point lead. And after they go on that 20-2 run, for the most part, they were in control the rest of the game. They ended up winning the game by 8 points. And this was something that watching the game when they were playing Utah on Saturday, it looked like it was going to just be another typical Mississippi State game that we've seen this season, where they just aren't playing well against a good team. Look, now Utah is a good team. They're not great. I mean, they're like 7-4, so they're going to be kind of like Mississippi State, struggling to find their way into the NCAA tournament unless they have just a great conference season. But they're a better team than a lot of the teams that they've been playing. So this was encouraging that you got a good win against a good team, and you didn't give up. And that's one thing that you do have to kind of give Chris Jans credit for, is that this team never does give up. They will always typically fight hard, and they will typically give great effort throughout the course of the entire game. And that was the case this past Saturday as well. So basketball team looked pretty good. I'm pleased with what we saw. I'm hoping that we get more of this going forward, because right now, I think Mississippi State is like 113th in the net rankings. They're going to need about probably at least 11 wins in SEC play, if not 12, if they want to make it to the NCAA tournament. They've put themselves behind the 8 ball with the way they play the non-conference schedule. You've got 3 games you should win coming up. Memphis is probably going to be the most difficult, but it is at home, and Memphis has not played that well either. They're struggling to find wins, just like Mississippi State has struggled to find wins this season as well. So you should be able to beat that team, especially since they're coming to Mississippi State. But the hardest part of your non-conference schedule is cleared off the deck at this point. And now you need to finish up get these last 3 wins. You've got a game on Tuesday against, I think, Long Island, Then you've got Memphis on Saturday. I don't remember who the last game is against before they hit the conference schedule, but it's a game that they should definitely win. So maybe this can be a point where they'll kind of take off from this point. Look, I think that would have been the case with that game they played against Georgia Tech last week. But when Josh Hubbard went down with an injury against San Francisco, it derailed a lot of any possibility that Mississippi State could possibly win that game. They probably still should have been able to beat San Francisco even without Josh Hubbard, but it is what it is. So, like I said, I'm encouraged by what we see. I'm still not convinced that this team has all of their issues fixed. We'll see what happens when they get into conference play. Their conference schedule starts. Who do they start with in conference schedule in January? They start with Texas. Texas is 7-4, so they're kind of struggling. Then you got Oklahoma, who's 7-3. Kentucky's not been just spectacular. So you've got some opportunities to get some wins early on. And I don't think, while I do believe the SEC is still going to be really good, and I do believe that the SEC is going to still be a really strong conference, I don't think we're going to see it as good as it was last year. Last year, it was just absolutely insane how good it was. I think 14 teams made the NCAA tournament, or 13 or something like that. It was a lot. I don't know that we're going to get that this year. So like I said, a lot of the other teams have not played as well either. So you can go in and get some wins, and they're going to need to do that. Like I said, I'm thinking it's going to take at least 11 or 12 to get that net ranking where it needs to be once we hit conference play. Now, let's talk about the women real quick. I have not talked much about the women's team because I don't know what to make of the women's team. They're 10-1, which is great. You say, yay, 10-1, that's really awesome. But their schedule is bad. I mean, it's really bad. They played 3 SWAC teams, if I'm not mistaken, when I looked at their schedule yesterday. And I think they have a 4th SWAC team coming up later on. Look, I'm all for, if you think your team needs a confidence boost before you get to conference play, I'm all for that. But the schedule that the women's team has played has just been really, really bad. I mean, you're 10-1 and you think, all right, that's really good. But normally 10-1 at this point of the season, you're getting if you're not ranked, you're at least getting votes and you're right on the outside of the AP top 25. You should be top 10, if no worse than like top 20 in the net if you're 10-1 at this point in an SEC team. Neither of those things are true for the Mississippi State women's basketball team. The Lady Bulldogs right now are 44th in the net, which, if you can turn this really bad schedule into a big confidence boost and win a bunch of games in your conference play, that net ranking will go up and they'll end up in the top 15, top 20. But right now, the schedule is so weak. despite the fact that they're 10-1, they're still 44th in the net, and that's not going to cut it. They're going to have to get better. They don't have any good wins on their resume right now. The only good team that they played, Texas Tech, beat them, and I think they beat them pretty easily, if I'm not mistaken. So they're going to have to get better wins. They're going to have to play when they get into conference play. They're going to have to play at the top of their ability level and pull off some upsets. They're going to have to beat the Texases, the Ole Misses, the Tennessees. I don't know if Tennessee's going to be that good this year. South Carolina, they're going to have to pull off some of these wins to make it into the NCAA tournament, because right now they just don't have any good wins. Right now they're 8 or 9-0 against quad 4. That's where most of their games have been played. And a lot of times that's the case for most teams at this point, but it's not normally where like 90% of your games are quad 4 games. Normally it's about half. And like I said, they're going to have to make sure that they end up, I don't know if the women still play 16 games in SEC play. I don't know if it's 16 or 18. I think it's still 16. But if it's 16, they're probably going to have to win at least 11 just to make it into the NCAA tournament, because their non-conference has been so weak. Maybe not that. Maybe if they break at least 500 in SEC play, but they're going to have to play well once we get to conference play, because their non-conference schedule has just not been good. And like I said, they're going to have to really step up and show up once conference play starts. And it's tough in women's basketball because there are a lot of good women's SEC basketball teams. So they're going to have to really step up and rise to the level and beat some of the teams. They had a few good wins last year. They beat LSU at home last year. They're going to need to do similar things like that this year when conference play starts. They're going to have to get some upsets and prove that this 10-1 record that they've gotten off to, this 10-1 start that they have, isn't just the byproduct of a bad team playing a really bad schedule. So we'll see if they can do it. I like Sam Purcell. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good recruiter. But we just haven't reached the same level. We haven't even come close to the same level that the Bulldogs were at when Vic Schaefer was the head coach. And for people who don't, whenever you start hearing people talk about, a coach doesn't make a team, I always caution you and tell you that be careful thinking like that. While it is possible for a coach who comes in and just turns the program around and makes them into something that they weren't, once that coach leaves, that program can sometimes really fall back on hard times. When Vic Schaefer left, I really thought, the program was built. I thought it was in the right direction. And then Nikki McCray-Penson comes in, who had a really good resume coming from Old Dominion. She had a really solid resume coming in. It doesn't click. The Bulldogs struggle immensely. And sadly, she ends up passing away. She ends up resigning after her first year because of health issues. She ends up passing away. And the Bulldogs just have not been the same since. They've made the NCAA tournament. They've actually won a couple of games in the NCAA tournament, but we're nowhere close to being the team that was playing for back-to-back national championships, or also made an Elite Eight in 2019. Like I said, we're a far cry from that at this point. And it's really sad to see when your team was at such heights and doing such incredible things, for them to just be struggling to get by their way into the NCAA tournament. So I'm hoping that the women's team can get this thing straightened out, and I'm hoping that they can carry this momentum into conference play. We'll see. I don't have a ton of confidence in it, because that schedule just doesn't say that they are a battle-tested team. But who knows? Maybe they do have the confidence to going into this. All right, let's talk a little bit about the passing of Rob Reiner. I don't want to get into too many details about his actual death. The only thing that has been confirmed by reports before I started recording this show was the fact that an assailant who broke into their home, there are a lot of rumors and speculation flying around about who that person actually is. Like I said, I had not actually seen confirmed reports about that, so I don't want to comment on it. I just want to now spend this time talking about just how great a filmmaker he was. And he was really good, especially the mid to late 80s, early 90s. He was probably as good of a filmmaker as there was in Hollywood at the time. He got his start, obviously, in television. His first break in terms of movie directorial debuts, or movie directing that he had a really good breakthrough on was, I think it was his first film, and this is Spinal Tap. This was the mockumentary about a legendary rock band who a film that many of us have seen and loved, and this is kind of like his big breakout for him that just made people take notice of the fact that Rob Reiner was going to be a really good filmmaker. And from that moment when he makes This Is Spinal Tap, which I think he did in 1984, if I'm not mistaken, he goes on in just an absolutely incredible run of about 5 or 6 films that you won't see many directors go on. And I may get the order of this wrong, but they were all in the same ballpark. You had This Is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, Misery, When Harry Met Sally, and A Few Good Men. And there was probably some more others that I'm forgetting that were in there as well. But that was just the type of, he just went on just an incredible run where he had just some absolutely incredible films. And one of the things that Rob Reiner did so well that so many other directors can't is he could go into his secondary, he had like secondary and third genres that he could go into. I mean, he's very much known for being a comedy director. Comedy was his fastball. There's no question about that. But he could do other things as well. I mean, if you had told me if I didn't know who directed those films, if you told me the person who directed The Princess Bride also directed Misery and also directed A Few Good Men, I never would have believed it, because those are such different types of films, and there's not a lot of filmmakers that can do that. Most filmmakers, they kind of specialize in one particular genre. Like, for example, Jordan Peele, as good as he is, his specialty is horror. Steven Spielberg, as good as he is, and he's done different types of films, but for the most part, what he does is, kind of feel good films. That's what he does. I mean, he does some other things as well, but that's what most of the time there's a positive, affirmative, storytelling that goes along with Steven Spielberg films. Like I said, so these are the types of, most directors, whenever they do films, it's typically a certain type of film that they do really well, and they don't really stray from that. Rob Reiner is one of the exceptions. He could do a lot of different types of films. And for me, like I said, Rob Reiner's best, for me personally, was The Princess Bride. I love The Princess Bride. I thought it was just one of his best films ever. I still love that film. If it comes on television, I will just stop and watch it every single time that I see it. It is just an absolutely amazing film. But there were other films I loved as well by him. Like I said, obviously A Few Good Men is great. When Harry Met Sally is great. I mean, those are just absolutely wonderful films. Stand By Me is, an iconic film for a lot of people my age, because, people my age were very close to the ages of those kids in Stand By Me. So it's really sad to see him gone. Look, Rob Reiner didn't have quite the impact that he did in his later years, but for the most part, once we got into the 2000s, Rob Reiner he had enough money, he started making films that he wanted to make, and therefore he didn't really worry about, if they were going to be big box office successes. He just wanted to make certain types of films, and that's what he did in the later stages of his career. Like I said, just an absolute legend. Just has some of the best films that I've ever enjoyed. And the Rob Reiner film just doesn't get made anymore. One, because he specialized in comedies, but the other films that he made, they typically weren't huge budget films that, $200 million budgets that you expected to make $800 million to $1 billion on. That's not the type of film that Rob Reiner made. And so therefore those aren't the types of films that studios prioritize nowadays. They just don't make those kind of films anymore. The types of films that Rob Reiner made go straight to streaming nowadays. And there's nothing wrong with going straight to streaming. For the most part, a movie that I'm about to talk about, like the Knives Out films, that's what they're intended for. They're intended for streaming because those streaming companies want them on those platforms. And Rob Reiner wasn't really interested in making movies that went straight to streaming. He wanted to make movies that he liked and movies that he enjoyed in the later stages of his career. He had plenty of money, so there wasn't any real reason for him to try to bow down to whatever studios wanted and asked him to make. So, like I said, he'll be missed. I hate to see him go, and I hope that we get some more clarity about whatever happened with his death. Like I said, there's a lot of rumors out there, and there's a lot of smoke around who they believe to be the perpetrator of this crime. But like I said, without having a confirmed report, I don't want to speculate on it. And it's possible that it gets confirmed while I'm doing this podcast, but as of right now, it's not. So, all right. Like I said at the top of the show, I did watch the new Knives Out film, Wake Up Deadman. I want to try to keep this as spoiler free as possible. That way, if you haven't seen it and you're just wondering if you should turn on Netflix and go check it out, you can. I think this is a really good film. I think it's better than Glass Onion. I don't think it's as good as the first one. And I think that is kind of the consensus that most people have. I really enjoyed this one. One of the things that I liked about this one is this one relies a lot more on the secondary character, on the main supporting character, than the previous ones did. The previous ones relied heavily upon the supporting character. And Ana de Armas's character in the first one, what's her name? Monet. I can't remember Monet's first name, but she was the primary supporting character in the second one. And in this third one, Wake Up Dead Man, Josh O'Connor is the primary supporting character, and he has a much larger part in the film than either of those previous ones. This one, Rian Johnson really looked at what Josh O'Connor was capable of and said, I'm going to kind of trust you to be almost like a co-lead for this film, along with Benoit Blanc, who's played by Daniel Craig. And I think it works really well. I think Josh O'Connor was up to the task. It's a little bit of a different tone. This one is a little bit more, I don't want to say serious, but it kind of is. It's got, there seems to be a little bit more depth. He's not going for the humor as much as he did in the first two films as he is in this one. And one of the things that I liked about this film is it could have easily been just people who follow religion are bad. People, the Catholic religion and people who follow Christianity are bad, and we shouldn't be like them. It could have easily done that, and I was afraid that's what it was going to do. I thought it was going to be just very overt in its criticism of what it was trying to criticize, which I thought the first two films were much more subtle in this criticism. But when you get through this, you realize that's not the case at all, that this is more about a criticism of the religious figures in the world today who use their platform, who use their personality as a means to get power, to get wealth, to get influence. And the criticism of that, where they lose their authenticity and they don't have what it is that makes people want to come to religion in the first place. So like you said, that's what I liked about this film, is it looked like it was going to go down that road where it was going to just be a very overt hammering home, religion is bad. You shouldn't be a Christian, all this type of stuff. It doesn't do that. It basically says, it is more a critique of the people who are the people who we see in the spotlight so often, and the rhetoric they use and the things that they say. That's what makes this film, I think, so just incredibly good. It's not over the top in terms of its criticism. It's it becomes more subtle about what it's trying to say, because Josh O'Connor's character, he is confronted throughout the course of this film by Benoit Blanc. Josh O'Connor is basically confronted on numerous occasions by Benoit Blanc as a critique on his faith, but Benoit Blanc even realizes throughout the course of this, there are times when he understands what faith can do and what it can be for people, and he understands the importance of that. Even if he doesn't subscribe to those ideas, he eventually comes to understand just why it's important and why it should be something that Josh O'Connor should continue to devote his life to, even if he doesn't agree with it and doesn't follow those same ideas and philosophies. Like I said, there's a lot to it. It's fun as well. It's still just a fun murder mystery, if that's what you're looking for. It's still very much that. To me, this was the least obvious person who was the killer. I thought it was very obvious who the person was responsible for all of the deaths in the first two films were. I thought that was very obvious from the get-go in the first two films, whereas in this one, I thought it was much less obvious. I thought I was still trying to figure out how they were getting to the death of this person in the third one, really all the way up until the very end. I know some people said that they keyed in on who it was from the get-go. I did not. I didn't have that reaction. But I know that some people did. Other things that I liked about the film, other things I didn't like about the film, the only real complaint I have is this one, probably more so than the previous two, didn't have as much for its supporting cast to do. I think that is one of the trade-offs for giving more of a leading role to Josh O'Connor, is you've got people like Kaylee Spaney. You've got people like Hayden Thomas Church, who aren't doing quite as much in the film as everybody else is. So that's kind of that's probably the only one real issue, is that there were some flat characters in this that you didn't really get in the previous two films. But overall, I thought that was really good and really enjoyed it. It's going to be one of my favorite movies of the year. I love these films. I hope Rian Johnson makes as many as he wants. And I hope, though, that if he does, that Netflix will allow more of the films to go, allow the film to go to more theaters to start with before it goes to Netflix, or Netflix allows that. I know Rian Johnson would prefer it goes to a bunch of theaters, but I would hope Netflix would allow it to go to theaters a little bit more so than they have in the past. All right, real quick, I want to finish off with some thoughts on the new Metroid Prime game, Metroid Prime 4. I finished it up this weekend. To me, it's good. It's not great. It's not what I expect in a Metroid game. It's like I said, it's a good game. But it's not a great game. There are parts of the game that feel like it wanted to be something else than what it was. I'm not a fan. I don't want to have NPCs in my Metroid game. That's one thing I do not want. All the NPCs that are in this, I just don't understand what they were doing with it. I don't. And once you get to the ending, I really don't like the NPCs and what their role was in this. I'm not a fan of it at all. It was a distraction. I was not a fan of that aspect of it. There is, unlike most Metroid games, this one has like this big giant desert that's in the middle of the game, and you can tell that they wanted this to be more of an open world game, but they didn't really feel like they could commit to it. And you just kind of have this purposeless void that's in the middle of the game, where all it does is serve to have something for you to do, to ride a motorcycle. And that's basically all that it seems to be. I'm not, like I said, I wasn't really a big fan of that. But when the game is actually, when you're actually in like the biomes for this particular game, when you're in the ice world, the flame world, the electric world, when you're in all these different places, it works really well. It's just, like I said, there are some concepts in it I don't think that worked. Like I said, I enjoyed it for the most part. It's kind of a short game. It only took me about 15 hours to get through it. And it would probably take a lot longer if you're going for 100%. I just wasn't, I wasn't enjoying it enough to sit there and try to go for 100%, because you also have to get what's called these green energy. And there is so much green energy on that desert open world. It's almost, it's not, it would take too much away from the game to sit there and go for it. So like I said, I was not a huge fan of it. It's a good game. It's not bad, but considering the fact that they announced this game in 2017, 8 years ago, and then we're just now getting it, I was kind of hoping for something more than what we got from Metroid Prime 4. Like I said, not a bad game, but it's definitely not what I expected. So, all right. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope and pray that you have a great week. We'll get back together sometime later this week. I don't exactly know when. It'll probably be probably Thursday or Friday. I'm not sure when. I want to kind of see what happens with the Bulldogs and maybe some other shows out there as well. So I appreciate you guys tuning in, and until next time, we'll see you then.